Howdy, it's me. This video is late. Not because I have a schedule or anything, just because it's late. I intended this to go up before the Dead Space. We're talking about Dead Space. I intended this to go up before the Dead Space remake came out. That didn't happen. I could give you a list of reasons, but it didn't happen. School's tough. So, enjoy. I'm gonna go to bed. Sometimes in life, you happen upon things that make you wonder, how did I live without this? For some people, it's a special someone. For others, it's, therapy. But for me, it was Metal Gear Solid, and that's why today we will be talking about Dead Space. Released in October of 2008, Dead Space was pretty much a smash hit. It revitalized survival horror, and horror for that matter, in a fun, intensely creepy, and emotionally draining experience. When you start the game, you play as Isaac Clarke. Isaac Clarke is a guy. He loves being a guy, and being a guy is his thing. He also kills aliens, which is another hobby of his. The story is fairly simple. You, as Isaac, are with a repair crew on your way to the planet cracker Ishimura. When you get there, however, you discover the entire crew is dead, and a murderous thing-like horde of creatures called necromorphs has taken over. You must get to the bottom of it by fighting countless monsters and making repairs to the ship as needed. To ensure your survival, you must rely on your armor, plasma cutter along with various weapons available, and legs that can dismember enemies with one big stomp. The game gives you maybe 5 seconds to take in this new world before saying, enough of that. We just got here. While parents throw babies in pools to teach them how to swim, Dead Space is like that, except the pool is a zombie-ridden spaceship and the baby is you. Dead Space takes the swimming pool approach, which in my opinion is the best approach. Throwing you right into the action really helps the player feel immersed in the experience, and not only that, but it does a fantastic job of keeping you engaged in it as well. Throughout the whole game, I guess you could say if I had a diaper on, I'd have a full diaper. Unfortunately for me, I was not wearing a diaper, so now I just have ruined jeans. That's the Dead Space experience. Beating the game is like the next step after Pampers. Dead Space is scary, and it's very rare to find areas where you feel safe, which is why I found comfort in making a necromorph stomping corner whenever I got the chance. Dead Space, like most works of fiction, has a handful of inspirations that it pulls from. In terms of movies, it was Paul W.S. Anderson's Event Horizon and the 1972 Soviet film Solaris. For gaming, the biggest inspiration was just one title, just one game, the horror game to inspire all horror games, and honestly just games in general. You might have heard of it. It was a small game called Resident Evil 4. Seriously, what a game. Arguably the most influential game of its time that is still inspiring games coming out now, and a title that has stood the test of time as being a perfect, badass horror action experience. I'm American. When Resident Evil 4 came out, the creative director of Dead Space, Glenn Schofield, essentially wanted to make a game that was RE4 in space. Its influence is very obvious from start to finish. Dead Space is played from a third-person, over-the-shoulder perspective of Isaac, just like Leon Kennedy. Dead Space mixes action and horror survival mechanics by giving you intense, heart-pounding moments of in-your-face necromorph action that requires you to blast away until the screaming stops. And then following it up with you needing to scrounge around in a dark, creepy environment and search for ammo, healing items, and other collectibles, just like Leon Kennedy. Dead Space's basic formula is extremely similar to Resident Evil's action approach, but it is far from being a mere ripoff. Dead Space is able to wear its inspirations on its sleeve while still innovating unique gameplay mechanics that help establish its own identity. I think it's also worth talking about what the state of the survival horror genre was like at the time of Dead Space's release. So to help me with that, I'm bringing in an expert, the cook, the boss, my friend, Erik. So, Erik, how were horror games back then?
well, it wasn't very good. For all the good that Resident Evil 4 did, it did kind of inspire some ugly trends. It gave some developers the wrong idea that horror games are too scary and they should have action as the primary draw instead. Even Capcom got the wrong idea about RE4's success by pushing the action angle even more with Resident Evil 5, though I do kind of like that game. Other titles had similar struggles. Silent Hill had lost its way and had a very middling entry with a questionable action focus, with 2008's Silent Hill Homecoming. Alone in the Dark failed at modernizing itself for a new generation with its 2008 reboot. And does anyone remember Clive Barker's Jericho? Horror gaming was far from being in its worst period, but it was definitely not at its peak. The genre just needed a new phenomenon to show the world that survival horror was all bark and all bite. If the state of horror games at the time was a toddler, Dead Space was a hungry pit bull.
At the time of writing this, it's hard to talk about Dead Space without mentioning its up-and-coming remake. Personally, I'm very excited for it. While I believe that the original Dead Space holds up extremely well in both its combat and horror feel, a remake definitely has a lot of potential to make it even scarier with the latest cutting-edge graphics and more immersive lighting and audio effects. From the trailers that have been released, it looks like this remake is delivering on that in every regard. The game looks visually beautiful, and the combat looks oh so gory. Unlike the original, however, Isaac will be fully voiced in the game, with Gunnar Wright reprising the role from Dead Space 2 and 3. That alone will make the game a suitably different experience from the original.
But the elephant in the room, Isaac's new face.
Adam Sandler? What are you doing here?
Waiting for them to play Gangnam Style.
Yeah, he looks like Adam Sandler, but I don't think it's as big of a deal as many have made it out to be. Did we forget that Isaac wears a helmet for almost the entire game? You see his face at the beginning and end of the game. I really don't think those two scenes of looking at Happy Gilmore are gonna ruin the experience of the whole thing. And if the game is successful and they decide to continue by remaking Dead Space 2, I'm sure we'll get another Chris Redfield and RE7 situation, and they'll make Isaac look more like his original, depressed, traumatized self in the next one.
Oh gosh, it's got me thinking about RE7 Chris again.
You are not him! Ah, that's better.
Dead Space is incredible. Is it 15 years old? Yeah. Does it matter? No. Even with the remake coming out, I think the original is still horrifyingly beautiful in almost every way, minus the random difficulty spikes that make me want to curb stomp myself. The music and the sound design remain haunting, and while a graphical update is nice, the original graphics do not fail to provide a truly unnerving and scary experience.
Dead Space is a true gem of its era and withstands the test of time. It is still effective in its scares and spooky atmosphere, and the gameplay, while a little janky at times, offers fun doses of combat that reminds you that you can still have fun playing a video game. Because, believe it or not, horror games can be fun and not soul-crushingly frustrating and make you want to drop it for a few months. I mean, I really like Alien Isolation, but, oh, Jesus Christ, those vents.
As we said, we do very much anticipate the remake and will definitely make a follow-up video upon its release, but if they were to never touch the series again, we would be perfectly content.